We all want to feel peace in our lives. Peace in our choices, our beliefs, our relationships, and our environment. I've learned that this desired contentment is often found through holding on to less. When we pare down what we own, what we consume, and what we value, we're left with what's intentional, a personalized curation of what is important and true and useful to us. I'm Shannon Leyko, and you're listening to Paring Down, a podcast aimed at helping you declutter not only your home, but any area of your life that's overwhelming. Here, we're having interesting and honest conversations about the physical and mental clutter that drowns out what truly matters to each of us. And together, we'll learn how to pare it all down, not for the sake of perfection or becoming rigid, rather so we can move through life with less overwhelm and more joy, wisdom, and peace. Hey guys, welcome back to Paring Down. It's another week together, and you know that makes me so happy. So hi. Thank you so much for being here. I've had some just tremendously kind DMs and emails in the last couple of weeks, and I just want you to know how much that means to me when you take the time to reach out or leave a review. I've been reading some super kind reviews. Anytime you take the time to give me feedback about the show and tell me that you're enjoying it, the things that you think I'm doing well, the subjects that you'd like me to cover in the future, it just shows that you're engaged here and that you are a super generous person, that you would take the time out of your day to encourage someone else, and that someone else being me. And I just want to say thank you. A lot of you know how much that interview last week with Gretchen Rubin meant to me, and getting your DMs about it made me so happy. And, you know, I am very hard on myself when I listen back to these podcast episodes because I feel so strongly that I don't want to put anything into the world unless it's truly benefiting the people listening. And so I do a lot of research and I try and be super prepared. And so many of you commented that you could see that preparation, especially in the Gretchen Rubin interview, because she gets interviewed by so many people. Anyways, that it was just one of those things that you could tell that I meant it when I said I was a fan, and that I was able to ask questions you hadn't heard her asked before. And anyway, I can't tell you how much that feedback means to me, because I am critical of myself and I want to know that I am being responsible when it comes to having a platform like this one. So anywho, I just thank you. Thank you so much. If you haven't left a review and you could take the time to do that and just press 5 stars or write something very short and sweet about why you like the podcast, that means everything. And it helps so many more people find the podcast, you know, when they go and they see all the different decluttering and minimalist podcasts out there trying to make their choice. And then they read your words saying, oh, this host is particularly prepared, or she is relatable, or all the kind things you've been saying about me. Golly. Like, that really just helps people decide to click in, and then that helps me continue doing this work. So thank you. I've also gotten a lot of feedback recently about my new decluttering checklist. So I just want to make sure you guys know that is available. I created it, funny enough, on our road trip from Florida to Alaska, like in a hotel room. One night my kids were watching a movie and I was just like itching to get some work done. And I just don't feel like this work is work. It really feels like a hobby to me still, even though it has become a job. And I mean, that's just the greatest thing on earth, isn't it? And so I made a decluttering checklist that you can go kind of like room by room and check off things that need to be decluttered. So you just feel like you have a better starting point instead of just staring at it all and being like, what should I get rid of? You know, so it gives you food for thought. It's super easy to use, and that is available in the show notes. It's just my free decluttering checklist. Okay, but let's talk about the subject at hand today. This has been a highly requested episode recently, so I'm excited for those of you who have requested it. Even if you don't have a storage unit, I think that this episode will still be really useful because you can apply these practices to most spaces, especially those overwhelming spaces. Plus, we'll be talking about some mindsets that, of course, will help you in your decluttering journey, no matter what room you're dealing with. I personally have never had a storage unit. Well, that's not entirely true. My husband had a huge storage unit when we got married. So, you know, what's mine is yours, honey. So I guess I did have a storage unit, and I helped him clean that out more so it became our garage. He just like moved everything into our garage in our first house. And since then, I've been slowly, helping him clean out the garage, which was essentially his storage unit relocated. But today we're talking about going through your storage unit in a fashion that isn't going to take years and years like the way I've approached it. This is if you want to buckle down and decide that is your project at hand and you are going to get it done. There are different reasons that we have storage units and reasons we declutter storage units. There's different end goals. We're going to talk about all those different things if you are someone who has a storage unit because of inventory for a job that you have. There's that. It could just be stuff that you don't know what to do with. It's left over that you'd put in for temporary use during a move and never took it out. It could be because you have a loved one's storage unit you need to go through. It's not even your stuff. Whatever kind of storage unit you've got, we're going to cover it today. But first, I'm going to tell you some interesting facts about storage units just because I think it's fun and maybe a bit shocking to know. So, the United States has more self-storage facilities, not like individual storage units, facilities, than Starbucks, McDonald's, and Subways combined. So as of 2023, there are over 50,000 self-storage facilities in the United States. There are 15,000 McDonald's. There are 9,000 Starbucks. What is the plural of Starbucks? Starbucks. The more you know. Okay, so 15,000 McDonald's, 9,000 Starbucks, and there's 50,000 storage facilities. Wild. Okay, nearly 1 in 10 U.S. households rent a storage unit. More specifically, 9.5% of American households. So if you have a storage unit, you are certainly not alone. That is a huge percentage of the population. The average cost of a storage unit is $100 to $200 per month, which can sound, reasonable, but we're looking at $1,200 to $2,400 a year. $1,200 to $2,400 a year. That is a significant amount of money that you can be using for something else that matters more in your life if you want to. Actually, today's episode, just so you know, is not only for people who want to completely get rid of their storage unit. This is also for people who might want to keep it and just like organize it better, declutter it and organize it and still have it as a functional part of their lives, which is great too. But for people who want to get rid of it or just feel like there's stuff in there that has gone to die and you don't even know what's in there anymore, it is not worth $2,400 a year, I tell you that much. I think one of the traps is people say, I'm going to sell this stuff at some point, so I want to keep it so I can sell it. $2,400, or even the lower end, let's go $1,200. Is the stuff you're keeping in there actually even worth that much if you were to sell it? Like, you're spending money and then you say, I'm going to sell it. It just doesn't really add up. I think we can really go down the wrong route, and the sunk cost fallacy gets real strong here, right? That's like the longer you've invested in keeping it, the more you're convinced you need to sell it to make some money back off of it. And then you just end up in a debt hole and you're never going to get that money back, even if you were to sell that item. So keep in mind that storage units really are a recurring financial cost of sometimes indecision or emotional attachment, and we can do better. We can let it go, and we can still be kind and gentle with ourselves, have emotional attachments to things because we are humans, not robots, without spending this unnecessary money on something that doesn't actually support you living the life that you want to live. Here's an interesting stat. 65% of people with storage units keep them for over a year. A pattern that happens is that a lot of people initially rent storage units as a temporary option. It's between moves, or I just need to put this somewhere for now and then I'll go through it later. And then they end up keeping them for over a year or indefinitely. So what is supposed to be very temporary is no longer temporary, because storage units make a lot of sense for some temporary moves, right? Like, you sell your house, you can't move into your new house yet, put your stuff in storage for a couple of months while you live in an Airbnb or a short-term furnished rental until you get your new place, right? Like, storage units are not inherently evil or impractical. They make a lot of sense. They make perfect sense for entrepreneurs or small businesses who need to have warehouse space, and it's way cheaper than a warehouse, so you just get a storage unit. I'm not anti-storage unit, but if you're one of the people who it was supposed to be temporary and it is no longer temporary, we got to get rid of it. Second of all, you're not alone. 65% of people keep them for over a year. And I promise that 65% of renters are not entrepreneurs. Last interesting fact, the storage industry generates over $44 billion annually. Holy moly, $44 billion. It's actually one of the fastest growing sectors in real estate. It is considered recession proof from what I've read online, is that people will continue paying that $100, $200 a month without even thinking about it. And since 10% of the United States population has a storage unit, it's a really great investment for investors. And so you see them popping up more and more, and it's becoming this just hugely successful industry. So why is it so successful? What are some of these common reasons people have storage units? I've already mentioned a few, but maybe you're moving or relocating. This is the top reason across all age groups. However, like I said, a lot of them become long-term solutions rather than temporary solutions. It's also very common if you're downsizing and you still want to keep things just in case, maybe for future generations, those emotional items that just don't fit into your new space. So this is really common for empty nesters, retirees, or just anyone moving into a smaller home or apartment. And I would say this is a dangerous category because if it doesn't fit into your current life now, it's probably just excess. And that's not to say sentimental items are excess, but there's a matter of figuring out how to use them and enjoy them in your daily life rather than saying that they're important to you, but then they just go sit in a box in a storage unit among many other things that are not important. So it's a matter of having a physical boundary around those things, keeping some, not all. We're going to talk about all of that. So downsizing is another reason that people have storage units. Another reason might just be because people want to declutter their homes, but they don't want to get rid of everything. It's similar to downsizing, but you're not actually downsizing. You're just trying to create a more minimalist type of a home, maybe during spring cleaning, or you're really, inspired by my podcast. Hey. And so people move things out of their house, but they still can't really decide what to do with it, if they want to sell it, if they want to take it to a consignment shop, where to donate it, and they want to donate it ethically. And so they just have all these decisions to make. And so this is a solution for them to not necessarily make the decision right now. It's kind of out of sight, out of mind, but at least my house is decluttered and I can enjoy a non-stressful home life where the stuff isn't, closing in on me, which I support. I think it's so important to create a space where you live your daily life that is not closing in on you. That's why I have a podcast about decluttering. But we want to make sure we're not just moving the clutter somewhere else to go die, because that is still hanging over our heads. And eventually someone in this earth is going to have to take care of that. So let's be responsible with our possessions. And if we're going to declutter, let's truly declutter. We also see storage units for people who are going through major life transitions, like divorce, like death of a loved one, caring for their elderly parents, or of course, welcoming a new child, because kids come with a lot of stuff and you want to hold on to it for their future siblings, whatever it might be. So the storage units serve as a buffer, really, during emotionally intense and messy times when you just don't have the energy to deal with the stuff, when you are not sure what life will bring. And so in that sense, it's temporary storage. It also can feel like a form of control, like at least I've got this stuff here in case I need it. And that's really, really valid, especially when you're going through something really difficult or something very new, like welcoming a kid. But the goal is that wherever we live, of course, we'll need some storage inside of our homes. But we should be able to find a spot for those things inside of our home, even if you feel like your home doesn't have good storage options. It's a matter of not letting things go to die in a storage unit because you can't whittle down and say, what do I actually need versus I want it all. I want to keep it all. I want to have all the options. Ultimately, it's costing you a lot of money. It's costing you a lot of time trying to figure out where things are. And you're not giving yourself enough credit to say, I can figure this out within my own daily space. And then the last one I've written down here is that, of course, I mentioned you might have a business or a side hustle where you have inventory, equipment, supplies, that sort of thing in a storage unit rather than a warehouse. So I'm going to walk you through practical steps of how to declutter your storage unit, whether it's decluttering someone else's storage unit, specifically after a death. I'm going to talk about what to do if you want to get rid of your storage unit altogether versus what to do if you want to declutter and then reorganize your storage unit for better use. We're going to touch on those three things. But with all three of them, there's a similar process. So I'm going to share that overarching process. By the way, thank you to the person who emailed me. What is your name? I'm going to find it right now. Jolie. Thank you so much for emailing me and telling me it's overarching instead of overarching. Do you guys remember that on a couple of episodes back? I was like, I don't know how to say this word. Is it overarching or overarching? Anyways, so shout out to my listener, Jolie, for actually emailing me and changing my life. Now I don't have to feel insecure every time I say that word. Okay, but anyways, I'm going to give you the overarching directive of how to declutter a storage unit, and then we'll talk about how it applies specifically to each of those different storage units that I just mentioned. So for each of these, there are 4 basic steps. 1, you're going to identify a physical boundary. That's your goal. I want all of this to fit in a bin. I want all of this to fit in this X amount of space. I want to get rid of the unit as a whole. Okay, we're going to talk about the different kinds of physical boundaries. But number 1 is you're going to identify a physical boundary. Number 2, you're going to sort things into keep, toss, and donate. Number 3, you're going to reassess. And number 4 is you're going to organize if applicable. Okay, so 1, physical boundary. 2, sort. 3, reassess. 4, organize. Where do you start? That's a big question. Identify zones. I don't think it makes a whole lot of sense to go by category just because from what I understand and from my personal experience, you don't really know where each category is. Like it's kind of spread out all over the place. Like you say, oh, I want to go through all the clothes. Well, there might be some clothes in a box in the way back that you can't even reach, and you don't even know what are inside of some boxes. And so it's complicated to go by category. So I suggest going by zones. If you already have a relatively well-organized storage unit, then a zone and a category is kind of the same thing, right? Like you've already categorized and zoned like things together. And so still, I would go by zone. So what is a zone? A zone is a corner, like a specific corner, a specific shelving unit. Really, instead of looking at the entire storage unit as a whole and being like, this is overwhelming. What am I supposed to start with? What is the most important thing? The most important thing is that you get through it all. Prioritizing just might slow you down because you're digging through and it just doesn't work. So you're going to pick the zone that makes the most sense to start with. Obviously, if the thing is chock-a-blocked in there, you start with the zone you can reach. I'm going to start with the left corner here at the front. I'm going to get everything that's on top of that folding table and underneath that folding table. There are 6 cardboard boxes stacked here to the right. I am going to go through those 6 things. It doesn't mean that's all you're doing for the day if you really want to get through this and tackle it big time. But for now, just focus on that one zone. That's where you start. One bite of the elephant at a time. You know what I mean? Like it's going to feel really overwhelming when you think, oh, I have this whole storage unit and I'm just doing these boxes. Like, okay, yes, you're just doing those boxes, but you can't declutter the whole storage unit unless you do those 6 boxes. So try and get out of your head of the overwhelming space and focus on one specific zone that you can say, this is what I'm doing right now. And it'll likely go way faster than you think. I think a lot of people think, oh my gosh, this is an overwhelming and impossible job, but it is not. You will be shocked at how much progress you can make in a short amount of time if you just get your hands moving, if you just get going. You just got to have a plan of doing the zones. And then, of course, knowing what you're doing with the stuff. That's another huge piece of getting started. You have to know what you plan to do with the different categories. You're going to have a keep or I'd like to keep pile. That's the stuff you want to put aside in a designated corner of the space. You might have to start that in the hallway until you make some space inside the storage unit. And of course, we'll go through how to make sure you're not keeping too many things, but I encourage you not to be overly precious about it. For this first round, do your absolute best to keep only the things that are actually useful, that have deep sentimental value. Like be kind of ruthless, but also don't expect yourself to get it perfectly done in the first round of what you decide to keep. You're going to go through that pile again later. It's not a maybe pile. For the record, I don't like that term because then you say, if you can't make a hard decision in the moment, you just throw it in the maybe pile. That's a hard decision you're going to make later and you're just not going to get rid of anything. So it's not a maybe pile. It is a I'd like to keep pile that you will reassess later. So you have your keep, then you have your toss. That's just trash that cannot possibly be donated or sold. And then you'll have your donation pile, which also kind of includes anything you want to sell, something that's going to not go straight into the trash. All of that I'm going to put under the category of donation. Keep, toss, donate. Before you get started, as you dive into your zone, make sure you know what you're doing with those things. For keep, like I said, I start a little corner of where you're going to keep stuff. For toss, put it straight into the dumpster if that's an option. If you have a dumpster on site, it goes straight there. For donations, it goes straight in the car because you're going to swing by the donation center on the way home. And then maybe you're going to have a couple things that as soon as you get home, you're going to take a couple pictures and you're going to put it on the no buy groups. You're going to put it on your Facebook, neighborhood Facebook group, however you want to get rid of it, but straight into your car. You're going to get rid of it as fast as you can. You don't want to leave that in the storage unit in a different pile from your keep pile being like, oh, I will figure out how to donate this stuff later. We want that to be an active part of the process. You get it done. Pro tip, if you do not have access to a dumpster, so you need to load trash into your car as well as donations into your car so that you can go buy the dump on your way home, use different color trash bags. So anything that is just total trash, put it in a white trash bag. Anything that is your donate stuff, put it in a black trash bag so you can tell the difference. Anything that's white, I just hop out of the car, all white bags get tossed into the dump. I know that the black bags I then bring to the donation center on the way home. Why do I choose black for donation? You don't want to see what you put in there because then you're going to start second guessing yourself. You're going to be like, oh, look, I can see through the white a little bit. And there's that shirt. Maybe I could get $20 for that sweater. It's a pretty nice sweater. Or like, I want to maybe try and sell that. No, put it in a black trash bag. You've decided to donate it. Stick with your choice. You won't even remember about it in like 2 weeks from now, or less. And you don't even know what's in the bag now, even though you just put it in there, 3 hours ago. So that's why I say do the black trash bag for donations. But anyway, the idea is to have two different color trash bags so you can easily, pop stuff out where it needs to go on your way home. So in terms of starting and in terms of how this is going to work for any storage unit, you identify those zones, you know what you're doing with the keep, toss, and donate. And then the other big piece of this is just make sure you have music or a podcast to give you energy. Okay, you will be amazed at how much easier it is to focus and stay working when you have something else that your brain is kind of doing on the back end of things. You'll be pumped up. My husband and I love to turn on like musicals. When we're decluttering a big project, when we went through the garage last year, we just blasted the Hamilton soundtrack. We blasted Book of Mormon. Like those songs we just think are fun and they pump us up. Whatever. That's us. We're nerds. It's cool. Whatever that is for you. Maybe it's 90s boy band music. No one's there to judge. Live your life. Put in some AirPods if you're embarrassed, but I even just play it loud on the speaker, I guess in a storage unit, you have people walking by, but they'll probably love your music too. Or put on a podcast. That's how I operate when I'm working on a decluttering project, even right now in my house, right? Like I just pop in a podcast that I want to listen to. And while my brain is being entertained by that, my hands are working. And before I know it, I've listened to an hour-long podcast and I've done an hour of decluttering and I've gotten so much done. So be sure that you have music or a podcast to give you that energy and that good kind of distraction as you're working. You guys know what I always say. The best way to start is just to start. Okay, so that's the plan. You've got this. You can do it. Let's talk about decluttering someone else's storage unit after a death. We're going to start with that type of a storage unit. I'm going to give you the big picture of those 4 key elements: the physical boundary, sort, reassess, and organize. And then we're going to cover some mental roadblocks because I know this is a particularly emotional task. Hey guys, it's time for your ad break. Each week I like to say a huge thank you for your graciousness that these are part of the podcast. Here we go. Let's talk about decluttering someone else's storage unit after a death. So we're going to take it in a 2-step process. We're going to do the keep pile that you have intentionally and a little bit ruthlessly decided to keep. We're also going to go through that a second time. So remember, you do not have to get this perfect the first time, especially when you've lost somebody. As you all know, I lost my mom. It's going to be years of a journey of letting certain things go that are really meaningful when they are first gone. And then in 5 years, you're ready to let a couple more things go. I'm 12 and a half years after losing my mom, and I just let her sewing stuff go, right? So be gentle with yourself. But the big thing here is choosing a physical boundary that you're comfortable with today. Your physical boundary, let's say, I'm going to go through the storage unit and I'm going to tell myself I can only keep what fits inside of this large plastic tub. In 12 years from now, you might not need that large plastic tub. You might have a smaller plastic tub that you keep those sentimental items in. And that's okay. But for now, choose a physical boundary that feels realistic for you and that feels practical for you, because you can probably store one plastic tub of stuff that's meaningful to you in your house. Or hopefully you can take stuff out of it when you get home, display it, use it, whatever you can do to honor the person you love with the stuff that they've left behind. But if you don't have that physical boundary, you're going to have a much harder time making decisions. Now, as you're doing that want to keep pile that we talked about, it's okay if you realize that it's gotten too big for your boundary. That's why we do a second reassessment at the end. You will likely want to keep more than what will fit in your physical boundary. And that's okay. Go ahead and do that first sweep. Come to terms with the fact that that's obviously not going to fit in your bin, because you're going to come back a second time and make even harder choices until things do fit inside your physical boundary. Give yourself that 2-step process to make things happen. But you're not necessarily putting things in the bin that are keep as you go. I would still just kind of put those in a separate pile it to the side, like I talked about before, just in the hallway as you're going, and then into the front corner, kind of as you're going through. That becomes your keep pile. And then at the end, once you do a full second reassessment, that's when you actually add things into the tote to see what will fit. Anything big, like furniture, that can live next to the bin. And then at the end, part of your reassessment will be, where do I have space in my house to put this? That's not crammed. That makes sense, right? Like, what am I going to do with this item? So I understand not everything is the type of item that could fit inside of a bin, but just go ahead and keep those next to the bin or in your want to keep pile. And part of step 2 with reassessment is not only what will fit inside the bin, but like, what am I going to do with these items? So you're going to do the steps that I already talked about. You're going to have your keep pile. You're going to have your toss pile go straight into a dumpster. Donate pile straight into a car. Let's dive into reassessing the keep pile at the end of this process. All that's going to be left is your keep pile. Everything else has either been donated or put in the trash. It is way less overwhelming to make the final cut for your physical boundary when all the trash and the obvious donations are out of the way. This will not be easy. And I want you to know that it's not supposed to be easy. We were created as emotional human beings, as communal human beings. And how beautiful is it that we have relationships with people so deep that just the memory that unlocks with certain items that are associated with them brings us back to being with them. I think that's beautiful. There is nothing wrong with feeling sentimental about items. And we have to remember that the person we love doesn't live inside of this stuff. That back in the day, before there were photographs, before people had the space to keep as much stuff from their loved ones who pass away, before storage units were ever invented. That doesn't mean that the people who lived back then had lives that were any less important and valuable, and that their relationships were any less deep. They live through the memories we have. They live through how they influence the way we see the world around us. They live in us. And then who we are gets passed down to the next generation. And so much of who I am is because of my great-grandma and her great-grandma and her great-grandma. Isn't that wild and so cool? And I don't have stuff from those people, but so much of who I am and what's been passed down to me just, internally is because of that. And I think it's just so important to keep that in mind, that these people do not live in their stuff. So we can make hard choices to keep some things because we can, but we don't want to keep all of it so that it bogs us down. So when you're looking at your keep pile, start with the big stuff. Start with the stuff that would not fit inside of a bin and ask yourself, where exactly in your home will you keep this? Like, where will it naturally and comfortably fit? Do you need to get rid of a different piece of furniture in order to make space for this one that matters more to you? For example, I used to have a desk that we had gotten on Facebook Marketplace. And I also have my mom's old sewing table that I was using as a side table in our guest room. Well, we moved houses and needed to reassess. And I realized I need to get rid of this table, this Facebook Marketplace desk that doesn't matter to me. I'm going to use my mom's sewing table as my desk. So a lot of times it's not that you're going to add to your home. It's that you're going to replace something in your home with the piece of furniture that matters more to you. We don't want to just squeeze it in somewhere for the sake of squeezing it in. That's stressful. That's not what we want our home to look like. So make sure you have a valid place to use it and to put it. If you do not, it's okay to not keep it because it's not important enough for you to replace a different item with, or it's just not practical enough for you to replace a different item with. And furniture is really big and bulky. And your loved one might have loved that reclining chair. And that's so amazing. But what are some other creative ways you can preserve the memory of them using that item without using it yourself? So this could look like you have a picture of them in that old recliner. What you can do is even use a pocket knife, go cut out a square of that fabric and frame it and put it on your wall. And you might say, well, that's, destroying the thing or whatever. I'm like, listen, you can get a little swatch And someone's still going to buy that from the thrift store because they don't expect it to be perfect anyway. Or maybe it's nasty and no one's going to buy it because as much as you love your grandfather for having sat in it, nobody else wants to sit there hiney in that nasty thing. So go ahead and get yourself a piece of the material and just accept the fact that piece of furniture served its purpose for as long as it could, and maybe it's time for it to go die, in the landfill. Not that you guys know how I feel about the landfill. I'm not promoting waste, okay? But you know what I'm saying here, okay? So see if there's a way that you can preserve the memory without that big, giant item inside of your house. I personally think it would be so cool to have a picture of your grandfather or your dad in their rocker and frame it next to a piece of fabric from that rocker and have it in a double frame on your wall. Gosh, what a beautiful way of celebrating his life and that memory of him in his favorite chair without having a giant, ugly chair in your house. Let's get creative here, people. So first you're going to go through that big stuff. And then here are some questions to ask yourself about the rest of the sentimental items. And reminder, I have an entire episode about sentimental items, which I highly suggest listening to if this is a big piece of the struggle for you. It's episode 5 of the podcast. I will have that linked in the show notes. But a couple questions is, does this item hold a specific memory or just a general feeling of guilt? I can't get rid of this. Or is it really holding something that makes you feel good when you look at it? Another question, which I actually just kind of answered, but can I preserve this memory in a smaller or more meaningful way? Instead of keeping all of the china, the good china, can you keep a single coaster because your mom or your grandma or whoever it is loved to host parties and maybe she used the good china, but you don't use good china, and that's okay. Who does these days? If you do, that's awesome. Good for you. But the rest of us, right? Just keep a coaster as a memory of, man, she was such a wonderful hostess. You don't need to keep 3 boxes of china. And also remember that a picture will do. We are so fortunate we have pictures these days. If you have a picture of the person you love using that item, you can also just let that serve as the memory. And I hope you have it in an album. I also have a podcast episode about decluttering photos. Which if you want that one, I will link it in the show notes as well. Okay, next question. Is there a different sentimental item that already holds the essence of this one? This is a matter of numbers. So this is why I only kept 2 of my mom's sweaters and 2 of her half marathon t-shirts. All of them felt sentimental to me, but I didn't need to keep all of them. In fact, I think I'm down to 1 of her half marathon shirts now. Keep some or one, not all. I loved how I shared with you recently, I was unpacking this box that had really been untouched when we got here to Alaska and had gone untouched for years. And I found these incredible old books in them. I'm talking ones that my grandfather read when he was a child, published in 1931 with yellowed pages. It was so cool. I mean, that's almost 100 years ago, right? This box was it was so amazing to open. And anyway, what I appreciated though is that my mom had kept 1 book from her dad's childhood, 1 book from her mom's childhood with her mom's little kid handwriting that said Millie Anderson, which she must have written in there in the 1930s. And I think there were 3 books from my childhood. And that was it. That's great. It wasn't like she had this huge bin full of tons of books that everybody had. She had 1 for each person and 3 for her because, she's her. She read those books to me as a kid. That's, more meaningful to her. Anyway, is there something else that is in the keep pile that holds the same essence, and how can you whittle it down so you only have 1 thing or just a very, few amount of things that represent whatever it is? Last question to ask yourself is, do I trust that their life and our relationships was and is still meaningful, even if I don't have every physical item that jogs a memory? We have to remember that their lives and the validity of them being alive is not in the stuff. Like I said, it is in us. And even if we can't remember every last thing and we think, oh, but I can't remember. I don't have that good of a memory. I need this in order to spark the memory. I had to let that go with my mom. I had to realize I won't remember every last moment with her, but that doesn't make our relationship any less beautiful, and it doesn't make her life any less important. Okay, before we move on to the other 2, which won't be as long as this one, because they're not always as emotional, and anything that was sentimental and emotional about going through a loved one's stuff, you can also apply that to going through your own stuff if you have a lot of sentimental items in your storage unit. But there is a piece of loved ones passing away storage unit that I think is important to touch on, and that is in terms of setting things aside for other family members to claim. So here's what I suggest doing, because that can really stall progress when you're trying to figure out who to give stuff to, right? So I suggest sending a gracious email, and we're going to talk about what a gracious email looks like, ahead of time to other family members that would be interested in the stuff inside the storage unit, saying that you'll be going through the unit on X date and we'll be sending pictures to the group or individuals as you go. This gives them a heads up that it's coming. So in that email, it's also important that to say, like, for the sake of making progress, you'll need a response in 24 hours if someone wants an item. And if they do, then you need to give them a reasonable window to come get it, especially if they're local. If you're willing to ship it, then obviously you'll just go ahead and do that if they say that they want to lay claim to it. But make sure you're willing to actually go through the process of shipping something, because it's not a simple process. At least for me, I hate going to the UPS office. You got to pack it up. You got to pay for it. There's a lot of moving pieces here. So that's a wonderful thing to do. My aunt has done that for me. She sent me stuff from my grandma's house in California. I'm so grateful for that. But just make sure that's a responsibility you're willing to take on. More about this gracious email, because the way I just said it could sound harsh. Like, you gotta come get it in 24 hours or, whatever. You gotta get it in a week. You gotta respond to me in 24 hours, blah, 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 blah. Okay. With anything in life, let's just have some emotional intelligence here. It's how you present the information. That matters, right? If you have a really toxic family, I'm not a therapist, I can't help you. But this is how I would approach it. And I have a non-toxic family. I would email the other members of the family. Let's say my mom had a storage unit after she died, and it was my responsibility. I was designated to go through it. Okay. I would email my stepdad, my brother, my sister-in-law, my aunt, my grandma, my cousins, whatever, whoever would be interested in having something from her. And this is what I would write. Hey guys, I'm going through my mom's storage unit. I know this is an emotional task for all of us, and I want you to know that I am thinking of each of you and the relationship you had with her as I'm going through her belongings, because I want to make sure that I'm not getting rid of anything that is meaningful to you as a sentimental item. That being said, I'm sure I won't be perfect in this process, but it does need to be done. If you would like to join me, this is the date that I have set aside that I can go and do this. You are more than welcome to come join me, and we can remember her together as we work through the storage unit. If you're unable to come, which I completely understand because you can't fly in or you're busy, I'm more than happy to take pictures of items I think you might be interested in, and I will be sending them to the group text or to you individually if I already know that you're the only person who would be interested in that. Please know that that is happening on X date, July 22nd, so that you make sure to check your phone, because I need to get rid of this storage unit. I don't want to continue paying for it. Also, it just needs to be taken care of. And so I don't want progress to be impeded, because, there's a lot of lag time with talking to you all. That's why I'm giving you a heads up. I just want to make sure you guys know it's happening on this date so that you can be aware you'll be getting text messages those days. And I would really appreciate a response within 24 hours, preferably immediately, if you would like an item. If you would like an item, I will happily keep it at my house or in the storage unit for the next week for you to come by and grab. If unfortunately you don't get it by that time, for the sake of my own space or for the sake of actually getting the storage unit cleared out, I'm going to have to add it to the donation bin. So just if it's important enough to you to want to claim, please make sure that you come and grab it from me. And I really appreciate this, because obviously I don't want to hurt anyone's feelings, but I also have to be reasonable about what I can manage. Or you tell them I'll ship it to you as soon as I can, right? But basically you're just leading with a lot of understanding and grace, but honesty as well. Just saying, this is a big task and I got to get through it somehow. So when you present it that way, I think people will be very understanding. Okay, the second type of storage unit is when you want to declutter it and organize it, but you're not planning on getting rid of it. Let's talk about this. So you still need to have a physical boundary. It's not going to be a tote that you want to take home with you. It's going to be different, but one that I suggest that is very important is that there's no double layering around the perimeter. I really think this should be the goal. Otherwise, you cannot easily access things, and that is what creates the feeling of clutter and really makes things unusable. And why have them if they're not usable? So your physical boundary goal is no double layering around the perimeter, meaning we want each wall of the storage unit to have your belongings nicely, on shelves or however you want to have it, where you don't have boxes in front of the shelf. You don't have boxes in front of boxes. Everything is easily accessible by walking straight up to it without moving anything else. That's what I mean by no double layering around the perimeter. Your steps are going to be basically the same as what I just shared in the previous type of storage unit, but you're going to have your keep pile. Now, if you have a ton of inventory, taking it all out, choosing what to keep, it's a little bit complicated. If you've already organized it in some form or fashion, then zone by zone, do keep, donate, toss, but you might not put the keep stuff aside. Does that make sense? Like the last time we talked about putting it all aside so you can go through it all and put it in your tote or do whatever you're going to do with it. You might not put it aside. You might leave it or put it back where it should go in that zone if you've already created zones. Even if you haven't created zones, I do suggest creating like piles as you go. So you pick the zone you're going to work on, and then with whatever the keep is, determine what the category of that is. If it's different categories, start creating little piles of different categories. So everything you're keeping, you're putting in like piles. The toss goes to the dumpster, the donate goes to the car, use the trash bag trick. Everything is the same for that. So once you have all your keep is now still there, and all your toss and donate is gone. This is when you do round 2 of the keep pile to fit into your physical boundary. So you look around, you say, well, I need to get different shelving options to make use of the vertical space so that I can easily access things without moving boxes in front of them. Maybe I need a table. Figure out what organizational product you need. I am not an organizational product type of a girl, as you guys know. However, when it comes to a space like this, you should have shelving, you should have a table, you should have things that make use of that vertical space so that you can easily walk up to everything on the perimeter of the storage unit. But before you even buy those, hold on, let me backtrack here. You've created your like piles, right? If you're coming at this and the place is not organized, right? If it's already organized, chances are you already have some product in terms of shelving. Things are generally already where you want them to go. And so that at that point is just, does it all fit on the shelves? If not, I need to get rid of some of it. If it's inventory, then put it in some boxes way up high on the shelf. If you have a ton and have the lower shelves where you can reach, more accessible, right? It's just organizing it in a way that makes more sense. But we're talking, you just have like piles everywhere now. First, determine where you're going to put those like piles in terms of when you walk in. We want this to make sense. So let's say you have Christmas decor and you have baby items, and then you also have sentimental bins. Which are the ones you want to be able to get into quickly? Well, you're probably once a year at least want to get to those Christmas decorations and maybe some baby items. So we want to choose zones that are near the front of the storage unit for holiday and baby items. So you take all of your holiday stuff and you kind of put it, even if you don't have your shelves yet, you put it over in the front corner. And next is baby items, right? Next is whatever category you've created with these different piles until every area of the wall in a semicircle is taken up. Now you look at these piles and look at how much do you have. Reasonably, what type of shelving would fit the amount of bins or the amount of stuff that you have. If you don't have those shelves already, that's when you order what you need. Don't just order a bunch of random shelves and tables. You want to look at what you have and make sure you're making good purchasing choices. Okay, so you have your shelving. All right, now you put everything on it in a manageable way. If it does not fit, if your zones, you're like, uh-oh, I don't have room for all these zones, or my zone has too much stuff in it. This one zone is taking up way too much space in order for them not to be double layers. That's when you do your second round of assessing your items and really determining if you need to keep it all, which you do not. A little different if it's inventory for a job, right? At that point, you might want to create the back stock behind. A lot of times backstock ends up in front of your zones. Like you have your nice shelving with everything organized on it. And then you get an extra bag of koozies or balls or whatever your inventory is. And you just throw it in front of the koozie and ball zone. We don't want to do that because that's blocking access to go actually get the nicely organized stuff that you need to use. So if anything, I would put the backstock stuff on those shelves behind and then You could put a table in front of it with your easy access stuff, right? And so if you need to get to more backstock, you might have to move the table, but that happens far less often than coming in regularly and getting the stuff you need, right? You'd have to move those boxes out of the front every single time you need something, if that makes sense. So you want the stuff that you rarely use to be on the layer closest to the wall, and then the one closest to you is the stuff that you want to access regularly. Physical boundaries are important because it will be hard. It'll be hard to fit everything. Let's take the entrepreneurial backstock thing off the table. If this is just your stuff that you want to have access to, that you don't want to keep at your house, then you have to be even more ruthless about this decluttering process. If you don't declutter, you're not going to be able to have an organized space, which is the goal, right? So again, you can't declutter unless you declutter. I say it all the time, but sometimes you got to make the hard choices in order to reap the benefits that you so desperately want. Another step for organization that I think is super helpful is an inventory tracking system. Now, there are apps that can help you. I looked up a couple. One is called Encircle. One is called Sortly. I will have those in the show notes, where some of them you can take pictures and figure out where it is and label things, all of that. I'm cheap. I don't like to pay for any apps. I also never use apps that I think I'm going to. I always just use Notes and Google Docs. So that's what I stick with. So I'll tell you what I would do. Once everything is in its zone, I would create a Google Sheet. So in the X-axis, across the top, I would put the name of each zone, from left to right. So it would go holiday decor, baby stuff, tools, sentimental across the top in each of those boxes. And then underneath each one, I would list the items that are in that zone. So under tools, I would write, I don't know the name of any tools. Who do I think I am? Fancy hammer, fancy power tool, roof ladder. I don't know, right? So anything in that zone would just go under there. And then under holiday decor, right? I'd write Christmas ornaments, stockings, backup Halloween costumes, Christmas trees, right? Anything that falls under a holiday situation. And the reason I say that this is helpful is because then if ever I'm do I have, and you can get real specific, do I have an 80s costume? I don't remember, right? Then if you had written each of your costumes down, I'm thinking about this because my husband can't let go of his costumes. Let's all say a prayer for him. So anyway, he has a box of costumes in our basement. It's hard for me to talk about. But anyway, so 80s costume. I don't know. I can't think of another one right now. Max from the Wild Things. What's the one from the Goofy movie, Powerline? Okay, so you write Powerline costume, Goofy movie. You write Max, where the Wild Things are, whatever. So that next time a costume party is coming up and you're do I have an 80s outfit? You just go into your Google Drive and in the search engine, you don't even have to find the document if you don't want to. You write 80s costume and it pops up and you're yeah, I do have that in my storage unit. Or you write whatever power tool. Do I still have one of those? Gosh, that would be useful right now. You go and put it in and it'll populate, right? It'll say, hey, that's in this document. That's in your inventory document. And then you can go and see what category you had put it under, because today you might think that a ladder goes under tools, and tomorrow you might think a ladder goes under Christmas decorations because you use the ladder to put up the Christmas lights. You don't know what next year you is thinking, right? So you know what category it is. You can easily go get it from the storage unit. That's how I would do it. If you don't want to do an inventory, totally fine. Still make sure those zones are super clear. Here's how I would also manage the zones. Because we know if we don't label things, we're going to start just sneaking things that don't belong there. And the next thing you know, you've got yourself a clutter zone. And then the next thing you know, your whole beautiful organizational system is just down the drain. So take some blue painter's tape, okay? And you're going to just make a line on the ground. Remember, this is all going around the perimeter. And so there shouldn't be double layers. You put a line on the ground in front of the Christmas shelving unit. And with a Sharpie on the ground, on top of that tape, you write holiday decor. So when you're standing behind that start line, you know that everything on that shelf is holiday decor. Maybe you needed to double up zones. You've got a shelf that's too big for one thing. So you write top 2 shelves, holiday decor, bottom 2 shelves, baby clothes. You write that on the blue painter's tape. So when you walk into your storage unit, you can send anyone. You can send your 7-year-old son in there. You park in the parking lot. Hey, here's the key, kid. Go in there, find the blue tape that says baby clothes, and bring me the green bin. That's where your sister's new clothes that I was saving for her is. Like anyone should be able to go in there and find what they need is my point, or at least get to the correct zone. So do that in front of each zone. Blue painter's tape, and on the ground, write what the zone is. That will also stop you when you get something new and you're like, I need to go put this in my storage unit. And you run in there, and then just as you're going to go toss it, in whatever corner strikes your fancy because you're in a rush, you're going to see that tape on the floor and be like, oh, well, I can't put this tchotchke in front of the baby zone. This has nothing to do with babies or kids, right? So you go find the right zone and put it there. And then you take out your little phone because it's worth it. And you go to that category in your Google Sheet and write down what you added. Voila. I hope that is helpful with some practical tips for organizing your storage unit. All right. So the last type of storage unit is you're decluttering it because you want to get rid of the storage unit altogether. The only thing that's different here really than when you're decluttering a storage unit to get rid of it, but it was someone else's stuff when you're going through it after the death of somebody, is that you likely don't want to keep everything all in one bin because everything you're keeping from someone who passed away is a sentimental item. That's usually why you're keeping it. Hopefully you can incorporate some into your lives, but generally speaking, you're creating a sentimental bin that you'll keep in your home that has sentimental items you can go through occasionally and enjoy and revisit how they make you feel and how they make you remember that person. Right now, we're not creating a sentimental bin. Anything you keep has to go into active use in your house, unless there are sentimental things, in which case you are creating a sentimental bin. But there's just a little bit more wiggle room here in terms of how much you want to keep and how you're going to manage this. So here's what I would do. You're going to get that blue painter's tape right back out. Painter's tape's the best. Have you ever seen that parenting meme or like advice where they're like, the only thing you need on an airplane if you're flying with kids, like toddlers, is blue painter's tape because it comes off of everything so easily and you just give them a piece and they're going to stick it on their window. They're going to stick it on whatever. They're going to stick it on you. And they're just so happy with painter's tape. I really think that painter's tape can solve the world's problems. But anyway, get your painter's tape out and create, if possible, I know some of these are chock-a-block full and you wouldn't be able to do this, a 3x3 foot square on the ground. Maybe bigger than that. Now that I'm, using my hands, 3x3, it's pretty small. You might want to do 4x4. And that's your physical boundary. I'm only going to keep what fits inside the square. Is it going to stay inside the square forever? No, because obviously you need to get it out of the storage unit. You're going to do something with all this stuff. But that gives you a limit of what you're allowed to keep. Instead of just saying, I'm going to keep whatever I think is useful or cool or I might need in the future, that's going to be a lot of that stuff in there because there's a reason you kept it to begin with. So you want to give yourself that physical boundary of saying, okay, I see this big storage unit, but I can only keep what fits inside this square. It really gives you a goal to work towards. Again, we're going to do a two-step process. Is it all going to fit inside that square when you've done your first round? No, it is not. It is going to be overflowing. You're barely going to be able to see the lines of the square on the ground, if at all. But that's when you do round 2. So again, we're going to give ourselves grace to do this in 2 parts. Same process, keep, toss, donate. And then what's left is just your keep. And you're going to do what you need to do to make sure that when you finish, you see those blue painter lines and everything is inside your square. And then there's a third piece to this puzzle here. Because we're getting rid of the storage unit, we need to figure out where each item will go before you bring it home. Because if you bring it home and you just throw it all in the back of the truck, oh man, that is going to be stressful. You know what it's going to happen? It's going to go in the garage or the basement. And all of a sudden, your garage and your basement is your new mini storage unit. Thank you, baby. I'll be out in 2 minutes. I'm almost done, okay?
Okay.
Thank you. Sorry. My adorable son is playing with his... You could probably hear him running down the hallway with his fire truck. Oh, the joys. The kids are home for the summer. I got to make it work, right? Okay, so I was saying you want to know what you're going to be doing with these items before they come into your house. If you do not have a designated spot for it, we need to do some more soul searching. If your garage is a total disaster of a garage and you're like, well, I'm just going to add it to the disaster, you know what I say? Good. Fine, because next you're going to approach your garage the exact same way that you approached your storage unit. Honestly, no one's perfect. You can't have everything perfectly laid out all the time and be like, oh yeah, I can just put these tools here. You don't have a blank hole. You okay, buddy? Oh, he's laughing. You don't have a blank hole in your garage area or your shed or whatever storage situation you might have at your house. You're going to have to make some room for that. And I get that. That means some more decluttering of the stuff that's also already in your home. There will be a little of that. And, just try and remember this is a process. It doesn't happen overnight. However, the majority of your items that you are taking home from this storage unit need to be things that you will actively have a spot for and use, that will not just go die on the shelves in your garage. That should come into consideration when you're deciding what to keep from the storage unit. Do I have a spot for it? Is it something that I will use regularly? If it is not, if it is super obscure, if you already have that item at home because you didn't feel like going to find it in your storage unit, so you bought a duplicate, which happens all the time, let the duplicate go. Whichever you don't like, go ahead and get rid of it. You don't need all the backups. And this is not about wasting money. In fact, it's the opposite. When you don't have multiples of the same thing, they do not get lost as easily because there's a lot more white space around everything. And therefore, you're not going to go buy duplicates when you can't find any of the millions of the item that you have. You can find it because it's just one and your space isn't cluttered. So people think backups are helpful when in reality, they actually cause more of the very issue you're trying to avoid. So I would really, really, really encourage you to make sure that you look at every single item in that 3 or 4 by 4 square before coming home and say, this is where it goes. This is what it's replacing. This is why it makes sense to have it in my house, not just I'll find a spot for it, because then your house is going to get super cluttered. Storage units are tricky. They make you think that you need all of these things, but if you really step back, you don't need them, or else you wouldn't have them in a storage unit for the most part. So remind yourself that there's a difference between want and need. And if we're forcing ourselves to live a calmer, healthier life with less stuff, we're going to have to forego some of the things that we want so we can get what we really want, which is to be free from all the stuff. I hope that was a helpful episode. I appreciate your patience as I have to mom a little bit, and hopefully you didn't notice, but I actually got interrupted twice when recording this. Once my internet went out, and then the second time there was apparently traffic on the island and I had to go pick up my 2 other kids from camp. And so my neighbor came over and was like, you might want to leave right now because of the traffic. And I was like, thanks for the heads up. So I had to go back and finish. And now my 4-year-old's home from camp. And so he, has his fire truck right outside. So this is just part of being the podcast family. I feel like you guys have an insider's look at my everyday life, but I'm so grateful to have you here. And next week is a really fun one. I think it's fun. I interviewed etiquette coach Allison Cheperdak. She's pretty darn huge on the internet. Her handle is Elevate Etiquette. So you might have heard of her through that. But anyways, we talk about how to make our homes feel welcoming and why decluttering is part of that, and how to have good manners when it comes to the stuff inside of our homes, and different other ways to be a good hostess, even if you're not a hostess kind of person like me. I think you'll find it to be really helpful. And it makes you really consider how the stuff in our house can make our home feel welcoming to other people or not. So that's good motivation to declutter. And it's coming up next week with etiquette coach Allison Cheperdak. So come back for that. I think you're going to love it. And I will see you then. Bye. You just listened to an episode of Paring Down with me, Shannon Leyko. If you enjoyed the show, it would mean the world if you can leave a review wherever you listen and share this episode with a friend. Those reviews really are what keeps a podcast on its feet for the long haul, and I will read every single one with a huge smile on my face. So thank you ahead of time. If you're watching on YouTube, don't forget to hit subscribe. Also, be sure to follow along on Instagram at paring_down, where I offer lots of tips and inspiration for paring down, along with what's new here on the podcast. Till next time.